She was only a little girl when the world ripped her life apart. 13 years old, Danielle Parker was supposed to be laughing with friends, worrying about homework, and daydreaming about the future. Instead, her nights were filled with broken glass, loud arguments, and the smell of cheap liquor seeping through the walls of her Atlanta home. Her story begins with tragedy, the kind that leaves permanent scars. Years earlier, Danielle's mother had been the glue of the family. She was gentle, strong, and always humming gospel songs while cooking in the kitchen. One rainy evening, her mother never made it home. A drunk driver sped through a red light, and within seconds, the Parker household went from warm to cold. For Marcus Parker, Danielle's father, that accident wasn't just the loss of his wife. It was the death of his soul. He turned to bottles instead of prayer, to fists instead of fatherhood. What made it worse? He blamed his daughter. He would spit the same cruel words over and over. "You're the reason she's gone. If she hadn't been out buying things for you, she'd still be here." Danielle, barely old enough to understand death, believed him. She carried that guilt in her chest like a weight, heavy enough to suffocate. Every bruise she hid under long sleeves at school wasn't just from his hands. It was from the crushing shame of thinking she killed her own mother. The neighbors heard the yelling at night, the bottles shattering against walls, the sobs that followed. But no one stepped in. Maybe they were too scared of Marcus. Maybe they thought it wasn't their business. In communities across America, silence often covers abuse like a blanket, hiding the truth until it's too late. Danielle tried to hold on to the memories of her mother, the way she smelled of lavender, the soft kisses on her forehead. But those memories were fading, drowned out by the sound of her father's rage. One night stands out above all the rest. Marcus came home drunker than usual, his shirt stained, his steps unsteady. Danielle had cooked macaroni with what little food was left in the pantry. She waited quietly, hoping the meal would calm him. But the moment he walked in, he slammed the pot to the floor. This is all you made? Your mother would be ashamed of you," he shouted, slapping the bowl from her hands. Danielle didn't cry this time. She had learned that tears only made him angrier, but the silence, her silence, infuriated him. He grabbed her by the arm so tightly that bruises formed instantly. He shook her until her teeth clattered, his spit flying as he cursed her existence. That night, he crossed a line he could never step back from. He dragged Danielle out of the house, down the front steps, and into the stormy street. Rain poured as thunder cracked across the Atlanta sky. The streets were nearly empty, but cars passed in the distance, their headlights flashing. Marcus shoved his daughter onto the sidewalk, his voice breaking into madness. "You're nothing but a curse. You ruined my life. I don't ever want to see your face again." He staggered back into the house, slamming the door. Danielle sat in the rain, trembling, soaked, bleeding from a cut above her eyebrow where she had hit the curb. The cold water mixed with her tears until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. This was it. 13 years old, abandoned by the one person who was supposed to protect her. The lightning above illuminated her small frame as she curled into herself, hugging her knees, whispering into the storm, "Why me? What did I do wrong?" That question, unanswered, would change everything. Long before that storm, Danielle lived in constant fear. Nights in her father's house felt like walking on broken glass barefoot, each step a risk, each word a trigger. When the sun set, she would count the hours until Marcus returned from the bar. Every creak of the floorboards, every jingle of keys at the door sent a jolt of panic through her chest. Sometimes he came home quiet, collapsing on the couch, too drunk to speak. Those nights were blessings. But other nights, he came home with anger burning in his veins. Those nights were hell. He would slam the door open, shouting at shadows, accusing Danielle of things she never did. If the dishes weren't washed, he cursed her. If his shirt wasn't ironed, he cursed her. If dinner wasn't hot, he cursed her. And if everything was done perfectly, he found something else to destroy. Danielle had scars, some you could see, others you couldn't. Bruises on her arms, a split lip hidden with makeup, But worse was the emptiness in her eyes. Teachers noticed she was quiet, too quiet, but she always forced a smile when asked if she was okay. In a country where thousands of kids suffer in silence, she became another invisible statistic. The house itself told the story. Holes in the walls where his fists had landed, shattered bottles in the trash, overturned furniture. The home that once smelled of her mother's Sunday dinners now reeked of alcohol and despair. Danielle would sneak into her mother's closet sometimes, clutching an old scarf that still carried her scent. She would bury her face in it and whisper promises into the fabric. "I'll be strong, Mom. I'll survive this." But survival wasn't easy. One evening, after another long beating, Danielle lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. Her arm ached from where Marcus had thrown her against the dresser. She pressed a pillow against her mouth to stop the sobs from being heard, afraid he'd storm back in. In that silence, she realized she wasn't living. She was simply waiting. Waiting for something to change. Waiting for someone to see her. Waiting for a miracle that never came. Across America, thousands of children live this way, trapped in homes where love has been replaced with violence. Danielle's story wasn't unique, but it was devastating. And for her, every day felt like another page in a nightmare that refused to end. The cruelest part? Marcus wasn't always violent. Sometimes he'd sit in his drunken haze, staring at an old photo of his wife, silent tears running down his face. In those rare moments, Danielle saw the broken man hidden under the rage. She wanted to believe there was still a father inside him. But every time she hoped, he crushed it with his fists or his words. That duality, the man who cried for his wife but beat his daughter, left her confused, torn between love and hate. One night, Marcus came home late, drunker than ever. His eyes were red, his steps unsteady. He muttered Danielle's name and stumbled toward her room. She froze under the blanket, heart racing, pretending to sleep. He stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, gripping the frame as if the walls were his only support. For a moment it seemed like he might collapse right there. But then his expression hardened. He whispered in a voice so cold it pierced her soul, "You should have died with her." Danielle bit her lip until it bled, holding in the scream that wanted to escape. That sentence became a knife in her chest. And as the thunder rumbled outside, Danielle realized something terrifying. Her father's anger wasn't just hurting her. It was pushing her closer to death one night at a time. The storm rolled in fast that night, as if the heavens themselves were warning of what was about to happen. Lightning cracked through the sky, rain drummed against the roof, and the wind howled through the cracks of the old Parker house. Inside, Marcus Parker sat slumped at the kitchen table, surrounded by empty bottles. His eyes were bloodshot, his breath heavy with the stench of alcohol. Danielle, just 13, had grown used to the storms, both outside and inside. She tiptoed through the kitchen, setting a plate of food in front of him. She had learned that feeding him sometimes softened his rage. Tonight she prayed it would work. But Marcus wasn't in the mood for mercy. He glanced at the plate, then swatted it across the room, food scattering on the floor. "You call this dinner?" he barked. "Your mother used to cook with love. You don't know the first thing about it." Danielle stayed silent. Experience taught her that words made things worse, but her silence only made him angrier. He stood, towering over her, veins bulging in his neck. "You think you can ignore me? Answer me." His hand connected with her cheek, the sound sharp enough to cut through the storm outside. She staggered but refused to cry. That refusal set him off. He grabbed her by the arm, dragging her toward the door. She begged, "Please, Daddy, I'll do better." But he didn't hear her. Not really. His grief had twisted into something unrecognizable. Marcus yanked the front door open, the storm's fury rushing in. He shoved Danielle out onto the porch, her small body crashing into the wooden steps. Rain drenched her instantly, mixing with the blood from a cut above her eye. "You're a curse," Marcus growled, his words slurred but sharp. "You ruined my life. You ruined her life. I don't ever want to see you again." The door slammed shut, leaving Danielle alone in the storm. She sat shivering on the sidewalk, hugging her knees as thunder roared above. Passing cars splashed water onto the curb, but none slowed down. To the world, she was invisible. Just another broken child in the rain. Her thoughts spiraled in a loop of pain. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am the reason Mom died. Maybe I don't deserve to live. Her voice trembled as she whispered into the night, God, if you can hear me, please, send someone. Anyone. I can't do this anymore. Lightning flashed again, illuminating her small frame curled on the ground. And though she didn't know it yet, that desperate prayer was about to collide with a stranger's path, a stranger who had the power to change everything. On the other side of Atlanta, a black limousine rolled through the rain-soaked streets. Inside sat Richard Hale, a man whose name carried weight in boardrooms across America. At 48, he was a self-made billionaire, the kind of success story people admired from a distance. But up close, Richard was a man hollowed out by loneliness. He had the penthouses, the sports cars, the magazine covers. He had employees who bowed when he entered a room. Yet none of it filled the emptiness inside. Money had bought him comfort, but it couldn't buy back what he had lost. Years ago, Richard had a little sister named Clara. She was everything to him, bright, kind, and full of life. But when Clara fell ill, Richard was just a poor young man working 3 jobs, unable to afford her treatments. He sat by her bedside as she took her last breath, whispering that he was sorry for failing her. That moment never left him. Now, every business deal, every dollar earned, felt like a shield against that guilt. But no matter how high he climbed, the ghosts of his past followed him. That night, after a charity gala filled with fake smiles and shallow conversations, Richard told his driver to take him home. Rain pounded the windows as the city lights blurred by. He loosened his tie, staring out at the storm, his thoughts drifting to Clara. "You all right, sir?" his driver asked. Richard forced a smile. "Just tired." But tired didn't cover it. He was exhausted, of wealth, of pretense, of living in a world where nothing felt real. As they neared an intersection, the driver slowed. "Road's blocked ahead. We'll need a detour." Richard nodded absently, his gaze unfocused until something caught his eye. Through the sheets of rain under the flicker of a streetlight, he saw her, a small figure curled on the ground, drenched and shivering. For a moment, he thought it was a hallucination, his mind playing tricks on him. But then lightning struck and the flash revealed her face. A young black girl, bruised and broken, clutching herself against the storm. "Stop the car," Richard said sharply. The driver hesitated. "Sir, it's pouring. We should—" "I said stop," Richard barked. The car screeched to a halt. Richard threw open the door, the rain soaking his suit instantly as he ran toward the girl. She flinched at his approach, her eyes wide with terror as if expecting another blow. "Hey," Richard said softly, crouching down. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't answer. Her lips quivered, her eyes darting between him and the car. Richard's chest tightened. He had seen many things in his lifetime: hostile negotiations, bankruptcies, betrayals. But nothing prepared him for the sight of this child, abandoned in the rain like she was nothing. Memories of Clara surged through him. He couldn't save his sister. But maybe, just maybe, he could save this girl. "Come with me," he pleaded gently. "You don't have to stay out here." Danielle shook her head weakly, fear locking her in place. Richard extended his hand, rain dripping from his cuff. He knew she had no reason to trust him, but he also knew that if he walked away, he'd never forgive himself. In that moment, under the storm's fury, a broken billionaire and a broken child stared at each other, 2 lives about to collide in a way neither could have imagined. Rainwater trickled down her face, mingling with the tears she wouldn't let fall. Danielle sat frozen, arms wrapped tight around her knees, as if that fragile shield could protect her from the world. Richard's hand was still outstretched, unwavering despite the storm. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The billionaire in his drenched designer suit, and the bruised little girl refusing to move. She whispered, her voice hoarse, "Why do you care? Nobody cares." The words pierced him. He remembered Clara's last words in the hospital. "You don't have to carry this alone." But he had, for years. And now here was this child, drowning in the same kind of loneliness. Richard lowered his hand but stayed crouched. "Because I've been where you are," he said softly. "Alone. Scared. Thinking the world would be better off without me. But you don't deserve this." Danielle glanced at him, searching his face for lies. She had learned to read people fast. Her father's moods had taught her survival. This man didn't look drunk, didn't look cruel. He looked sad. Behind them, the driver called out, "Mr. Hale, please, you'll get sick." Richard ignored him. "What's your name?" Danielle hesitated. She hadn't spoken her name in hours. It felt foreign on her tongue. "Danielle." "Danielle," Richard repeated gently, as if it were the most important word in the world. "That's beautiful." For the first time that night, she didn't feel invisible. He extended his hand again. Not demanding, just waiting. Slowly, hesitantly, Danielle placed her small, trembling fingers into his. The warmth of that touch, something so simple, broke the wall she had built around herself. Richard lifted her to her feet, his arm steadying her as she swayed. She was lighter than he expected, almost fragile, as if the world had already taken too much from her. "Let's get you out of the rain," he said. The driver opened the car door reluctantly, glancing at the soaked girl with suspicion. Billionaires didn't usually bring broken children into limousines. But Richard's glare silenced any protest. Inside, Danielle sat pressed against the leather seat, dripping water, hugging herself tightly. She didn't trust comfort. It always came before the storm. Richard removed his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It swallowed her whole, but the warmth made her shiver harder, as if her body was finally acknowledging the cold. He spoke gently, careful not to overwhelm her. "Where's your family, Danielle?" Her chest tightened. I don't have one." Richard's jaw clenched. He didn't press her for details. Not yet. He knew a wound that deep couldn't be forced open. The car rolled through the city, neon lights flashing past. Richard looked at her reflection in the window, so small, so lost. Something inside him shifted, a decision forming even before he realized it. He couldn't let her go back to the streets. He couldn't be another person who walked away. When they stopped at a red light, Danielle whispered almost to herself, "He said I was a curse." Richard's heart cracked. He leaned closer. "Listen to me. You are not a curse, do you hear me? You're a gift. And anyone who told you otherwise, and they were wrong." For the first time, Danielle's eyes filled with tears. Not because she believed him yet, but because no one had ever told her the opposite. The car pulled up to Richard's private residence, a towering penthouse overlooking the skyline, the kind of place Danielle had only seen in magazines. As the driver opened the door, Danielle froze. Fear surged back. She looked up at Richard with suspicion. "Why are you helping me? People don't do this for free." Richard took a slow breath. He understood her mistrust. "Because I couldn't save someone I loved a long time ago. But maybe I can save you." That answer silenced her. She didn't understand it fully, but something in his voice told her it was true. As they stepped into the grand lobby, marble floors gleaming, Danielle's eyes darted everywhere. Luxury felt alien, like stepping into another universe. But deep inside, a seed of hope had been planted. She didn't know it yet, but her life had just collided with Richard's for a reason neither of them could escape, and fate was only beginning to reveal its hand. The penthouse elevator rose with a quiet hum, its glass walls offering a dizzying view of the city lights. Danielle clung to Richard's jacket, her thin shoulders trembling. When they stepped inside, the warmth of the apartment hit her, a stark contrast to the icy streets she had been abandoned in. Everything gleamed: polished floors, modern art, walls of glass. It looked more like a museum than a home. Danielle didn't sit. She hovered near the doorway, ready to run if things turned ugly. Richard approached carefully, not wanting to spook her. "You're safe here, Danielle. No one will hurt you." Her lips parted, but instead of gratitude, she whispered, "Safe doesn't exist." Richard's chest tightened. How many times had she been told she was worthless? How many nights had she survived alone with that belief? He noticed the swelling on her cheek, the dried blood near her temple, the faint bruises on her arms. He felt rage stir inside him, but he pushed it down. She didn't need anger. She needed protection. "I'm calling a doctor," he said firmly. Danielle's eyes widened. "No," she cried, stepping back. Richard stopped. "Why not?" "Because if they know, they'll send me back," she whispered. "They'll send me back to him." Her voice cracked on the last word. Richard froze. He didn't know who him was yet, but the fear in her eyes was enough. He knelt down to her level. "Listen, I won't let anyone send you somewhere unsafe, but you need help. You're hurt." Danielle's breathing quickened. Hospitals meant questions. Questions meant authorities. Authorities meant her father. Richard thought quickly. "Okay, what if we bring someone here? A private doctor. No questions, no records. Just care." She studied him, searching for deception. Finally, she gave a small nod. Within the hour, Dr. Elena Morris, a discreet family physician Richard trusted, arrived. Her kind eyes softened when she saw Danielle. "She's malnourished," Elena murmured after her examination. "Bruises in different stages of healing, and this cut needs stitches." Danielle flinched as Elena cleaned the wound. Richard held her hand. "Squeeze as hard as you need to," he told her. Danielle squeezed, her small fingers gripping his like a lifeline. When Elena was done, she pulled Richard aside. Her voice lowered. "Who is she, and what happened?" Richard glanced at Danielle, who was curled on the couch under a blanket, half asleep. "She's someone who needs protection. That's all you need to know." Elena frowned. "Richard, you know this isn't simple. She's a child. If the wrong people find out..." "I'll handle it," Richard cut in, his voice sharp. "She's staying with me." Elena studied him for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. "Then protect her like she's your own." Richard turned back to Danielle. She stirred, blinking groggily, her voice weak. "Why are you doing this for me?" He sat beside her, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "Because no one did it for me when I needed it most." Her eyes closed, exhaustion pulling her under. But just before sleep claimed her, she whispered, "Don't let them find me." Richard's hand tightened into a fist. Whoever they were, they had already lost their chance. This girl wasn't going back. But what Richard didn't know was that Danielle's past wasn't done with her. And sooner than he thought, her pain would collide with his world in ways that could cost them both everything. The city was still asleep when Danielle stirred awake on the couch, wrapped in blankets too soft for her to trust. She blinked against the early glow filtering through the tall windows, her body aching but her mind racing. She didn't know how long she had slept, but one thought lingered. If he finds me, I'm dead. Richard was in his study, staring at documents he wasn't really reading. He had called off meetings, ignored calls, and pushed aside everything that once demanded his attention. For the first time in years, the market trends and endless deals seemed meaningless. All that mattered now was the girl sleeping in the next room. He walked back quietly, only to find Danielle sitting upright, staring out at the skyline. "You didn't run," he said softly. She glanced at him, her eyes shadowed. "I thought about it." He didn't press her. Instead, he poured 2 cups of cocoa, setting one beside her. "Thought you might need something warm." Danielle stared at the steam curling upward. No one had ever brought her cocoa before. She wrapped her small hands around the mug but didn't drink. Her lips parted, and for the first time since that stormy night, she spoke without being asked. My father used to tell me I was cursed. That's why my mom died. Richard's chest tightened. Danielle. He said if I hadn't been born, she'd still be alive. Every time he drank, he reminded me. Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed hard, daring Richard to dismiss her pain. He didn't. He leaned forward. That wasn't your fault. You need to hear me. None of that was your fault. Danielle's face crumpled, a wall finally cracking. For a moment, she looked less like a wary survivor and more like the child she truly was. But before Richard could say more, his phone buzzed. Reluctantly, he answered. It was his lawyer, urgent. Richard, there are questions about a minor in your care. Did you take in a child? Richard's jaw tensed. Why? There's chatter online. Someone saw you last night pulling a girl into your car. The tabloids are already sniffing around. They're spinning this as something it isn't. Richard's gut clenched. He had been careless, acting on instinct instead of caution. He looked at Danielle, who was watching him closely. She didn't need words to know trouble was coming. Stay here, he told her. She shook her head fiercely. They'll take me away if they find out. Please, don't let them. The desperation in her voice froze him. He promised, no one's taking you, not while I'm here. But deep inside, Richard knew the storm wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. And as Danielle leaned back into the couch, clutching the blanket like armor, Richard couldn't shake the truth. He wasn't the only one keeping secrets. Somewhere out there, her father was still alive, and he wasn't done with her. The headline hit the internet like fire. Billionaire Richard Hale, caught with mysterious black girl in his car. The article spread within hours. Photos snapped by a passerby showed Danielle stepping into Richard's limousine, drenched and bruised. The image was cropped, twisted, weaponized. Talk shows speculated. Blogs screamed for answers. The public didn't see a rescue. They saw scandal. Danielle sat frozen on the couch, staring at the images on Richard's laptop. Her heart pounded. They think you hurt me? She whispered. Richard closed the screen. His voice was calm, but his knuckles were white. They're looking for a story that isn't there. But people will believe it, Danielle said bitterly. They always believe the worst. Richard crouched in front of her, leveling his gaze. I don't care what they think. I care about you. But it wasn't that simple. Hours later, the phone calls began. Child Protective Services, reporters, board members demanding explanations. At noon, Richard's lawyer arrived, grim-faced. Richard, this looks bad. The media's painting you as a predator. They're asking why a billionaire is hiding a child in his penthouse. If you don't address this fast, they'll tear you apart. Danielle listened from the hallway, her stomach churning. She hated the word predator. It was the same word whispered at her school whenever her father showed up drunk. Now someone else was being painted with it, someone who had only shown her kindness. Richard finally slammed his fist on the desk. Enough. I won't abandon her. The lawyer stared. Then you'd better prepare for war. That night, as the city buzzed with rumors, Danielle curled into herself, shaking. Maybe I should leave, she whispered. Richard turned sharply. No. If I go, they'll leave you alone. He knelt beside her, his voice fierce. Danielle, listen to me. The world will always talk. They'll always twist the truth. But you are not a mistake I'm hiding. You're a person I'm protecting. Her lip trembled. No one had ever fought for her like that. But just as her walls began to lower, the door buzzer rang. Richard's security feed flickered on. A man stood in the lobby, his clothes disheveled, eyes wild. Danielle's blood ran cold. It was her father, and he had found her. Danielle's chest tightened as the elevator rose, her small fists digging into her sleeves. She had begged Richard not to make her go. Therapy meant questions. Questions meant the truth clawing its way out. and she wasn't sure if she could survive speaking it aloud. But Richard had been firm, though his voice carried no anger. Danielle, sometimes the things we bury eat us alive. You don't have to face it alone. Dr. Naomi Wright's office was quiet and unthreatening. Warm-toned lamps, soft chairs, shelves stacked with books and photographs of her own children. Nothing like the sterile rooms Danielle had feared. Naomi greeted her with a gentle smile. "Hi, Danielle. You can sit wherever you feel safe." Danielle chose the seat furthest from her, legs pulled tight to her chest. Naomi didn't press. She began with Richard, asking about Danielle's sleep, her habits, her fears. Danielle bristled, glaring at him. "Why are you telling her everything?" Richard leaned toward her, his tone steady. "Because I want you to heal, and she can help." Danielle muttered, "No one can help me." Naomi's eyes softened. "Why do you think that?" The room fell silent. Danielle stared at the carpet, her throat thick. For years she had built walls so high no one could climb them. But something in Naomi's voice, patient, steady, non-judgmental, pulled at the cracks. Finally, words tumbled out. "Because it's my fault." Richard's heart stopped. Naomi leaned forward slightly. "What's your fault, Danielle?" Her eyes burned, and suddenly it all came out, like a dam breaking. "My mom died because of me. If I hadn't been born, she wouldn't have gotten sick. My dad said it every day. He told me I was poison. He told me I was the reason she was gone." Her small voice shook with rage and grief. Richard's fists clenched, nails digging into his palms. Naomi's voice was calm, but firm. "Danielle, what happened to your mother was not your fault. You were a child. Children don't cause death." Danielle shook her head violently, tears streaming now. "You don't understand. He said it so much that I believe it." Richard couldn't stay silent. His voice broke. "Danielle, listen to me. You didn't take your mother away. Your father's pain twisted him, but that was never on you." Danielle looked at him, searching for a lie, but found none. He was trembling too. Naomi shifted her gaze to Richard. "You've lost someone too, haven't you?" Richard swallowed hard, his throat tightening. "My sister, Clara. She was younger than me, and she died because I couldn't save her. I was broke, couldn't afford her treatment. I built this empire out of guilt, and I still wake up every night wondering if I failed her." Danielle blinked. For the first time, she saw that same haunted emptiness in his eyes, the same shadow she carried. Naomi spoke softly. "You both carry pain you didn't create. But healing doesn't start with blame. It starts with believing you are worthy of love." Silence lingered. Danielle wiped her face with her sleeve. Richard reached across the space, his hand steady but not forcing. Slowly, painfully, she placed her tiny hand in his. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was trust. And just as that fragile bond began to form, the office door swung open. A man in a wrinkled shirt stood there, his breath thick with bitterness. Marcus Parker. Her father. Danielle froze, the blood draining from her face. And in that moment, the fragile world Richard had built began to crack. Marcus's eyes locked on Danielle, then darted to Richard. "So this is where you've been hiding my daughter." His voice was smooth, practiced, like a man who had rehearsed his lines. Danielle shrank into her chair, trembling. Richard immediately moved between them, his frame shielding her. "You don't get to come near her," he said sharply. Marcus smirked. "She's my blood. You can't keep her from me." Richard's anger simmered, but he forced his voice calm. "Blood doesn't erase what you did to her. You left her to die on the side of the road." Marcus's jaw twitched, but he laughed bitterly. "I was drunk, I made mistakes. But I'm sober now. She belongs with me." Danielle's breath quickened. She wanted to scream, to tell him he was lying, but fear glued her voice shut. Naomi stepped forward, her tone firm. "Mr. Parker, this is not the place. If you want custody, you'll have to take it through court. Marcus's eyes narrowed at Richard. Court or no court, she's mine. You think you can buy her like one of your companies? She'll never be yours. The venom in his voice made Danielle flinch. Richard stood taller. His tone was ice. She doesn't need to be mine. She needs to be safe, something you never gave her. Marcus lunged forward, but security rushed in, pulling him back. As they dragged him out, his voice echoed down the hall. This isn't over, Hale. You'll regret taking what's mine. The door slammed shut. Silence filled the office, broken only by Danielle's shaky breaths. Richard turned to her. She was pale, gripping the chair as if it anchored her to the earth. Danielle, he whispered, kneeling to meet her eye level. I need you to know something. Something I've never told anyone else. Her wide eyes met his. I once had a sister, he said, voice breaking. Her name was Clara. She was sick, and I couldn't save her. I didn't have the money. Every day I wake up thinking if I had been stronger, smarter, richer, maybe she'd still be here. That guilt has eaten me alive for decades. But when I saw you on that road, for the first time, I felt like maybe I could make a different choice. Maybe I could save someone this time. Danielle's lip trembled. But what if he takes me back? Richard cupped her small hand in his. I won't let him. Not while I breathe. Her tears spilled again, but this time, she didn't hide them. She leaned forward, collapsing into his chest. Richard held her, his arm steady, his own tears falling silently. For the first time, Danielle allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't a curse. But even as Richard swore to protect her, the echo of Marcus's threat lingered in the room like a storm waiting to strike. The courthouse stood tall and cold, its stone walls carrying the weight of decisions that could shape entire lives. For Danielle, the building felt less like a place of justice and more like a cage. She clutched Richard's hand as cameras flashed outside. Reporters shouted questions, their voices slicing through the morning air. Mr. Hale, who is the girl? Why is she living in your penthouse? Are the rumors true? Richard didn't respond. His jaw was tight, his hand firm around Danielle's. He shielded her from the chaos, guiding her quickly past the mob. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. Marcus Parker sat at the plaintiff's table, his suit pressed but his eyes still bloodshot. He looked like a man who had practiced charm in the mirror, ready to perform for the judge. Danielle's stomach churned. She could still smell the whiskey from nights long ago, still hear his slurred accusations. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Marcus's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, my client is a reformed man. He's sober, employed, and ready to give his daughter the stable home she deserves. It's clear Mr. Hale has no legal right to keep Danielle. She belongs with her father. Danielle's fingers dug into Richard's palm. Richard's lawyer rose calmly. Your Honor, while blood may tie families, safety and love make them whole. Mr. Parker has a documented history of abuse. Danielle was abandoned on the side of a road. Mr. Hale found her, cared for her, and has provided a safe environment since. To send her back would be sentencing her to further trauma. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge raised an eyebrow, glancing toward Danielle. Young lady, would you like to speak? Her heart stopped. The room blurred. Speak? In front of him? Marcus leaned forward, his smile practiced. Go ahead, sweetheart. Tell them you want to come home. Her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. Richard whispered, Only if you want to, Danielle. No one can force you. Her lips trembled. She shook her head. I can't, she whispered. The judge nodded solemnly. Very well. We'll reconvene tomorrow, but be warned, Mr. Hale. This case will not be decided by sentiment alone. The gavel struck, and the crowd erupted again. Cameras followed as Richard guided Danielle outside. She leaned into him, whispering so softly he almost didn't hear. What if they make me go back? Richard didn't hesitate. His voice was steel. Then I'll fight until my last breath to stop them. But neither of them saw the shadowy figure watching from across the street, camera in hand, waiting to sell their photos to the highest bidder. This battle wasn't just about custody. It was about reputation, money, and power. And Richard was walking into a storm bigger than either of them imagined. That night, the penthouse felt heavy. Danielle sat by the window, knees pulled up to her chest, staring out at the glittering skyline. Richard brought her hot tea, setting it quietly on the table. "You've been quiet since court." She didn't look at him. "They won't believe me. He'll smile, he'll talk nice, and everyone will think he's changed. That's what he does. And I—" Her voice cracked. "I never know how to say it out loud." Richard sat beside her. "Danielle, you don't have to be perfect with words. You just have to tell the truth. Your truth." She shook her head fiercely. "No one listens." Richard's chest tightened. "I will. And so will the judge, if you let them hear your voice." Her throat burned. For years, silence had been her only defense. Silence kept the beatings shorter. Silence kept the neighbors from asking questions. But now, silence might send her back. Richard leaned closer. "When my sister was sick, I stayed quiet. I didn't fight hard enough, didn't push loud enough, and I lost her. I can't change that. But you, Danielle, you still have a voice. Don't let him take that from you, too." Danielle's eyes welled with tears. For the first time, she wondered, what if I spoke? What if I told them everything? Later, in bed, she whispered into the dark, rehearsing words no one had ever heard from her. "He hit me. He left me. He told me I killed my mom. He told me I was nothing." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. The next morning, the courtroom was tense again. Marcus smiled confidently, his lawyer spinning polished words. Then the judge looked directly at Danielle. "Young lady, do you wish to speak today?" The room went silent. Danielle's knees shook as she rose, her small frame walking to the witness stand. Richard's eyes never left her, steady and strong, a silent reminder. "You're not alone." She gripped the edge of the stand, her voice barely above a whisper at first. "When I was little, my dad used to say I was the reason my mom died. He drank every night. He hit me when he was angry. And last week, he left me on the side of the road." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Danielle's voice grew louder. Tears streamed, but her words were clear. "I don't want to go back. Blood doesn't make someone a father. Love does. And the only person who's shown me love is Mr. Hale." Richard's throat tightened. Even the judge leaned back, stunned by the force of her words. Marcus's face twisted, his performance cracking, and as Danielle stepped down, trembling but unbroken, it was clear. Her silence had ended. But with that truth spoken aloud, Marcus's mask shattered, and his rage was about to come back stronger than ever. By the next morning, Danielle's testimony was everywhere. Billionaire accused of kidnapping girl. Teen exposes father in emotional courtroom breakdown. Is Richard Hale a savior or a thief? Every headline screamed louder than the last, twisting pieces of truth into weapons. Richard sat in his office, phone buzzing nonstop. His publicist's voice came through the speakerphone. "We need to release a statement, Richard. The press is painting you as some predatory billionaire. If we don't control this narrative, Marcus will win outside the courtroom before he even wins inside." Richard rubbed his temples. They don't care about the truth, they care about drama. "Yes," the publicist snapped. "And you're giving it to them for free." Meanwhile, Danielle was at school for the first time in weeks. Whispers followed her down the hallway like shadows. Some kids stared in awe, others sneered. "Hey, isn't that the Billionaire's girl?" one boy said. "No, that's the abused kid. I saw her crying on TikTok." "She's lying. Her dad looks normal." Danielle's chest caved in. She rushed to the bathroom, locking herself in a stall. For the first time, she wished her story had never gone public. That afternoon, Richard picked her up. She slid into the car, silent. He noticed the red around her eyes. "Bad day?" he asked softly. Danielle's lip quivered. "They think I made it up. They said, 'People like you only help kids like me for attention, like I'm some kind of trophy.'" Richard gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You're not a trophy. You're a human being. And if the world doesn't see that, then it's my job to make them." He wasn't bluffing. That evening, Richard stood in front of flashing cameras. His voice was calm but sharp, carrying across every microphone shoved in his face. "I didn't take Danielle Parker from her father. I saved her from being abandoned on the side of a road. This isn't about money, power, or headlines. This is about a young girl's safety. And if you can't see that, then maybe you've forgotten what it means to be human." The reporters went wild, questions overlapping. But Richard turned and walked away, leaving only silence in his wake. Danielle watched from the penthouse TV, her throat tightening. For the first time, she realized Richard wasn't just fighting for her in court. He was fighting for her in the world. But across town, Marcus smashed a bottle against the wall. The news anchors no longer described him as a reformed father. Now they called him the man accused of abuse. His lawyer tried to calm him. "We can spin this, Marcus. But you need to keep your temper in check." Marcus's eyes burned. "She thinks she can humiliate me in front of the country? No. I'll remind her who's in charge, even if I have to drag her out of that penthouse myself." The media war had only just begun, but Marcus was ready to make it personal. The next court session was different. Marcus came in with a new strategy: charm. His hair was neatly combed, his suit immaculate, and his eyes oddly clear. He looked like a man who had rebranded overnight. As Danielle and Richard entered, Marcus smiled warmly, nodding at Danielle as though nothing had happened. Richard whispered, "Don't look at him." But it was too late. Danielle's heart twisted. For a moment, she almost remembered the father who used to buy her birthday balloons when she was small. Marcus's lawyer began with a carefully crafted story. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client has been painted as a monster. But what's the truth? A man who lost his wife and struggled with grief. He drank, yes, he faltered, yes, but haven't we all? And now, a billionaire with unlimited resources is trying to erase a father's right to his child. Ask yourself, is that justice or power?" The gallery murmured. Some nodded in agreement. Then Marcus stood. His voice cracked at just the right places, his eyes glistening under the fluorescent lights. "I made mistakes," he said softly. "But I love my daughter. She's my blood. I can't sleep at night knowing she's calling another man Dad." Danielle froze. She hadn't called Richard Dad. Not yet. But Marcus's words planted seeds of guilt. Her chest tightened, and for the first time doubt seeped in. Richard noticed. He placed his hand on hers under the table, steady but gentle. But Marcus wasn't done. He turned toward Danielle. "Sweetheart, remember when I taught you to ride your bike? Remember how I held you so you wouldn't fall?" His voice cracked. "I never stopped loving you. I just lost my way. Give me another chance." Tears pricked her eyes. The courtroom blurred. For a split second, she wanted to believe him. The judge called a recess. As people shuffled out, Danielle bolted to the restroom, locking herself inside. She gripped the sink, staring into the mirror. Her reflection looked like a stranger, torn between two worlds. Richard knocked softly at the door. "Danielle, don't let him rewrite the story. You know the truth. You lived it." Her hands trembled. "But what if they believe him? What if I believe him?" Silence. Then Richard's voice, low and steady. "The truth isn't always the prettiest story, but it's the only one that sets you free." When she opened the door, her eyes were red, but her jaw was firm. Back in the courtroom, Marcus smirked. He thought he had broken her. But as Danielle sat down next to Richard, she whispered something that made his heart stop. "I remember the bike ride. I also remember the bruises." Her voice was steel now. And for the first time, Marcus realized His lies wouldn't save him forever. But desperate men don't surrender. They escalate. And Marcus was about to cross a line that would change everything. The storm outside Atlanta's courthouse that evening was nothing compared to the storm inside Richard's world. After court, Richard suggested they take a back exit to avoid the cameras. But somehow, reporters already knew where they'd be. A swarm of microphones blocked their path, voices overlapping like thunder. "Richard, are you paying this girl's silence?" "Danielle, is your story rehearsed?" "Marcus, do you think this billionaire stole your daughter?" Flashes blinded Danielle. She clung to Richard's sleeve, heart racing. Marcus stepped into the chaos with a grin, pretending to shield his daughter. "Please, no more questions. My little girl doesn't need this." He slipped his hand toward Danielle's shoulder. Richard yanked her back. "Don't touch her." The crowd gasped as the two men locked eyes. For a second, the air was heavy enough to choke on. Then it happened. A voice shouted from the crowd, sharp, angry, deliberate. "Richard Hale is a child snatcher," the mob erupted. Shoves, questions, cameras smashing against each other. Someone grabbed Danielle's arm, pulling her away. She screamed. Richard fought through, shoving cameras aside until he reached her. His bodyguards closed in, dragging both of them into a waiting car. The door slammed. The windows shook from the chaos outside. Danielle's breathing was ragged. "They hate me," she whispered. "The world hates me." Richard turned, gripping her face in his hands. "No, they don't know you. They only know a story that's been twisted. But I know you, Danielle, and I will not let them take you from me." His words calmed her, trembling for only a second. But Marcus wasn't finished. Hours later, a video surfaced online. Someone had recorded the scuffle outside. It was clipped, edited to make Richard look like the aggressor. The video was captioned, "Billionaire manhandles teen. Father tries to protect her." The internet exploded. Hashtags trended. Comment sections boiled over. By midnight, strangers who had never met Danielle decided she was brainwashed, that Richard was a predator hiding behind money. Danielle scrolled through comments until she couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened, panic squeezing her lungs. She threw the phone across the room and curled into the corner of the couch, sobbing. Richard picked up the shattered phone. His jaw tightened, his hands shaking. "They're not going to stop," he said under his breath. "Marcus won't stop until you're destroyed." Danielle looked up at him, her eyes red. "Then what if I stop first? What if I walk away so he leaves you alone?" The words cut him deeper than any headline. "Danielle," he whispered, voice breaking, "don't you dare believe you're a burden. You're not the problem. He is." But deep down, Richard knew Marcus had planted a seed. The ambush wasn't random. It was calculated. And Marcus was planning something bigger, something far worse. The next day, Richard's lawyer called with bad news. Marcus filed an emergency motion. He's demanding immediate custody, claiming Danielle is unsafe in your care. He's pushing hard for Child Protective Services to intervene. Richard's grip on the phone tightened. On what grounds? The lawyer's voice was dry. The video, the media, the public pressure. Courts don't operate in a bubble, Richard. Judges are human. They read the same headlines. Richard slammed the phone down. Across the room, Danielle jumped at the sound. "Are they taking me away?" she asked, her voice trembling. Richard forced his face to soften. "No one's taking you. Not as long as I'm breathing." But his certainty cracked when Danielle asked the next question. "Then why does it feel like I'm poison to you?" The words pierced him. He walked over, kneeling in front of her. "You're not poison. You're the reason I'm still fighting." Her eyes searched his face, desperate for truth, but Marcus's words haunted her mind. Every memory of pain tangled with every promise of love. That night, Danielle couldn't sleep. She crept onto the balcony, staring at the city lights. The air was heavy, humid, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. She thought about her father's words in court, his broken voice asking for another chance. And then she thought about Richard's promise, the way his hands trembled when he swore to protect her. Two men, two truths. One heart pulled in two directions. Suddenly her phone buzzed. A private message. Her father. "Sweetheart, I know you're hurting. I know Richard is filling your head with lies. But you're my daughter. Come home. Let me fix this." Danielle's stomach twisted. She knew what home had been. Fists, yelling, nights of terror. But what if he had really changed? What if Richard's fight was more about guilt than love? Tears streamed down her cheeks. She typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, she sent one word. "Why?" Marcus replied instantly. "Because blood is stronger than money. Because no one will ever love you like I do." Behind her, Richard stepped onto the balcony. He froze, noticing the phone in her hand. His voice was low but firm. "Was that him?" Danielle turned, guilt flooding her face. She didn't answer. Richard's chest tightened. "Danielle, I need you to trust me. If you let him pull you back in, he'll break you again, and I don't know if I'll be able to put the pieces back together." Her voice cracked. "But what if he's really sorry? What if you're wrong?" Richard didn't move closer. He just let the silence hang between them, heavy as stone. Finally, he whispered, "If he truly loved you, you wouldn't even be asking that question." Danielle dropped the phone, collapsing into tears. Richard gathered her in his arms, holding her as if the world itself was trying to rip her away. But while she cried in his embrace, Marcus was already planning his next move. And this time, he wouldn't just fight in court. He would fight in the shadows, where money and power couldn't protect her. The battle for Danielle's soul had only just begun. The week leading to the emergency custody hearing was a nightmare. Reporters camped outside Richard's penthouse, drones hovered above his balcony, and online petitions demanded Danielle be returned to her rightful father. Danielle sat by the window most days, staring out at the sea of flashing cameras below. Her world had become a glass cage, every move magnified, every silence interpreted. One evening, she whispered without turning her head, "Maybe I'm not meant to be saved." Richard froze in the doorway. The words sliced through him. He walked over, pulling a chair next to hers. "Danielle," he said, voice steady but trembling at the edges, "you are not some charity project. You're not a case file. You're a person. You matter more than you know." She turned to him, eyes filled with storm clouds. "Then why does it feel like I destroy everyone who tries to love me?" Richard swallowed hard. He thought about his late sister, the guilt that never left him. For the first time, he let Danielle see his vulnerability. "My sister died because I couldn't afford her medical bills when we were kids. I carried that shame for years. I thought making billions would erase it, but money can't bring her back. Saving you, it's not about fixing me. It's about making sure I don't fail someone else I love." The word hung heavy between them. Love. Danielle blinked, fighting back tears. She wanted to believe him, but Marcus's voice was still there in her mind, whispering, "Blood is stronger than money." That night she dreamt of two doors. One door had Richard's face, calm and determined. The other had Marcus smiling warmly, promising forgiveness. Behind both doors, shadows loomed. When she woke, sweat clung to her skin. Her chest ached, her pulse rapid. Later that day, while Richard was in a meeting with lawyers, Danielle found herself pacing the apartment. Something inside her snapped. She grabbed a hoodie, slipped past security, and disappeared into the Atlanta streets. She wandered for hours, her mind a battlefield. Finally, her feet led her somewhere she swore she'd never go again, her old neighborhood. The cracked pavement, the sagging porches, the liquor store on the corner. It all felt like stepping back into a nightmare. And there he was. Marcus, sitting on the front steps of their old house, a bottle at his side. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "Baby girl," he said, his voice breaking. "You came back." Danielle froze. Every instinct screamed to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Marcus stood, arms open. I know I hurt you. I know I failed you. But I can change. I already started. I just need my daughter back. Her lips trembled. You promised you'd never drink again. He glanced at the bottle, then shoved it behind him. It's just one slip, but I'll quit for you, I swear. Her chest tightened. For a moment, she stepped forward. His arms reached out, and suddenly, Richard's car screeched to a stop at the curb. He jumped out, fury in his eyes. Danielle, get away from him. Marcus's expression shifted from sorrow to rage in an instant. He grabbed Danielle's wrist, pulling her close. You're not taking her from me, he roared. Danielle gasped, torn between the two men, blood and love, past and present. The breaking point had arrived. The street erupted in chaos. Richard lunged forward, grabbing Marcus's arm. Let her go. Marcus shoved him back, his grip on Danielle tightening. She's my daughter. You can buy everything in the world, Richard, but you can't buy her soul. Danielle screamed, Stop it, both of you. Her voice cracked, echoing down the street. Neighbors peeked out from porches, phones recording, eyes wide at the drama unfolding. Finally, she wrenched free of Marcus's grip, stumbling backward. I can't do this anymore, she cried. Tears blurred her vision. Her father's lies, Richard's protection, the media's judgment. It all collapsed in on her chest. Richard stepped forward, softer now. Danielle, please. Look at him. Look at the bottle. He hasn't changed. He never will. Marcus's eyes flared. Don't listen to him. He doesn't care about you. He's using you to fix his broken past. Ask him. Ask him about his sister. Ask him why he's so obsessed with saving you. Danielle froze. Her heart pounded. Slowly, she turned toward Richard. Is that true? Richard's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to speak, but Marcus cut in, his words dripping with poison. He's not protecting you because he loves you. He's protecting you because he couldn't protect her. You're just his replacement. The street fell silent. Even the neighbors holding their phones paused, leaning in. Danielle's chest burned. Richard, is that why? Am I just a stand-in for someone you lost? Richard's eyes softened, but his silence lasted too long. The damage was already done. Marcus smirked, stepping closer. See, baby girl? I told you. He doesn't love you. He just loves his guilt. Danielle's legs shook. She backed away from both men, tears spilling freely. I don't know who to trust anymore. Her father's eyes glistened with false tenderness. Richard's face was a mask of pain, and Danielle's heart split in two. The betrayal wasn't just Marcus's manipulation. It was the truth Richard had tried to bury, the truth that Danielle wasn't sure she could forgive. Suddenly, police sirens blared. Cars pulled up, officers spilling onto the street. A neighbor had called in a disturbance. Cameras flashed. Reporters appeared like vultures. Danielle covered her face, sobbing. I can't do this, I can't choose. An officer stepped forward, separating Marcus and Richard. The scene was chaos, but Danielle's words cut through it all like a blade. If love is supposed to save me, she cried, why does it feel like it's destroying me? The crowd fell into silence, and as Richard tried to reach her, as Marcus shouted about his rights, Danielle did the only thing she could think of. She ran. Through the cameras, through the crowd, through the flashing lights. She disappeared into the night, and no one knew where she was going. Not Richard, not Marcus, not even Danielle herself. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and old wood polish, a mix of history and judgment. Danielle sat beside Richard, her hands trembling as she held a small silver bracelet Richard had given her weeks ago. It wasn't expensive, just a plain silver band. But he'd said, this isn't jewelry. It's a reminder. You are not alone anymore. She squeezed it tight like it could keep her from falling apart. Across the aisle sat Marcus Parker, clean-shaven, wearing a cheap suit but carrying himself like he owned the room. His sudden transformation stunned everyone. The drunk who once dragged Danielle by her hair now stood tall, voice steady, eyes locked on the judge like he belonged here. He even brought a lawyer, a sharp-tongued man who clearly smelled opportunity in Marcus's claim. The judge, an older black woman named Judge Reynolds, glanced between both sides. "We're here today to decide custody of Danielle Parker. The father seeks reinstatement of his parental rights. The respondent, Mr. Richard Hale, argues for guardianship." The tension was unbearable. Danielle's stomach twisted as her father's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client is a man who lost his way after his wife's tragic death. But he has fought his way back. He's sober. He's working. He's ready to provide a stable home for his daughter. That's his blood. No billionaire with a mansion can replace that bond." Danielle wanted to scream. Bond? What bond? He left her in the rain like garbage. She looked at Richard, but his face was calm, unreadable, though his clenched jaw told a different story. Richard's attorney stood next. "Your Honor, this isn't about money. This is about a girl's life. Danielle was hospitalized because of her father's violence. She carries scars inside and out. The man across this room didn't protect her. He nearly destroyed her. My client stepped in when no one else would." Gasps echoed from the gallery. A few journalists scribbled furiously in notebooks. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a story, one people would follow in the news by nightfall. Marcus suddenly stood, interrupting. "I made mistakes, yes, but that's still my daughter. I'm her father." His voice cracked with something between rage and desperation. Danielle's body froze. She hated how much power his voice still had over her. For a moment she was 13 again, shivering in the storm, begging him to stop. Judge Reynolds raised her hand. "Mr. Parker, sit down. You'll have your turn." Then came the part Danielle dreaded, her own testimony. The courtroom assistant called her name. She rose slowly, every step toward the witness chair heavier than the last. Richard gave her a subtle nod, his eyes saying, "I'm here." She sat, hands shaking, eyes fixed on the microphone. The lawyer asked, "Danielle, do you feel safe with your father?" Silence stretched. Danielle's throat closed. She could barely breathe. She glanced at Marcus. His eyes weren't pleading, they were commanding. The same eyes that once glared as his belt came down. Richard's eyes, in contrast, were soft, steady, reminding her she had a choice now. Finally, she spoke, voice cracking. "Safe? No, I've never felt safe with him. Not once since Mom died." Marcus flinched, but she continued. "He blamed me. He told me I killed her. He sold my things for alcohol. He hit me until I couldn't move. And when he was done, he left me on the road like trash." Gasps erupted again. Tears blurred Danielle's vision, but she pressed forward. "Richard didn't just give me a house, he gave me peace. He listened. He stayed when I pushed him away. He treated me like I mattered. Blood doesn't make you a father. Love does." The words hung in the air like thunder. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, her expression softening. "Thank you, Danielle." When she returned to her seat, Richard placed his hand gently over hers. No words, just presence. The hearing stretched on with legal back and forth, but everyone knew the weight of Danielle's testimony. When Judge Reynolds finally spoke, the room fell silent. "I have listened carefully. Mr. Parker, you may be sober, but sobriety doesn't erase scars you left behind. Danielle deserves stability and safety. I grant permanent guardianship to Mr. Richard Hale." Marcus erupted. "This is wrong. She's mine." He lunged forward, but security restrained him. His voice echoed down the hall as they dragged him out. Danielle's body trembled, not from fear but from release. For the first time in years, the chain that bound her had snapped. The gavel struck, case closed. But the story wasn't over, because freedom didn't erase the past. It only opened the door to healing. Weeks passed after the courtroom battle, but Danielle still woke up some nights sweating, expecting to hear Marcus's footsteps in the hall. Trauma doesn't vanish overnight, but every morning, She'd walk downstairs to find Richard sitting at the kitchen counter with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. One for him, one for her. No words needed. Just a ritual of safety. The mansion no longer felt like a stranger's house. It was becoming a home. Richard insisted on small things that mattered. Dinner together, no phones at the table, bedtime stories even if she thought she was too old for them. Slowly, Danielle let down her walls. One evening she asked him, "Why didn't you give up? Most people would have." Richard leaned back, staring at the fire crackling in the living room. "Because I know what it's like to lose someone you love. I lost my sister because I couldn't protect her. I swore if I ever had another chance I wouldn't run. You became that chance." Danielle's throat tightened. For so long she thought she was a burden. Now she realized she was someone's second chance at life. But healing wasn't just for her. Richard, too, began to soften. The man who once filled his days with business meetings and empty achievements now spent weekends teaching Danielle to ride a bike or helping her with school projects. For the first time in decades, his house echoed with laughter. Still, Marcus's shadow lingered. One afternoon, news came that Marcus had been found unconscious in a motel, bottle by his side. He survived, but barely. When Danielle heard, she felt an ache she couldn't explain. Hate would have been easier. But what rose in her chest was something different. Pity. Richard watched her wrestle with it. "You don't have to forgive him," he said softly. "I know," she whispered, "but I don't want to carry him forever either." So Danielle wrote a letter, not to send, just to release. She wrote, "You hurt me, you broke me, but you don't own me anymore. I forgive you, not for you, but for me." Tears stained the page, but when she folded it and tucked it away, she felt lighter. Years passed. Danielle grew into a strong, confident young woman. She discovered writing as her outlet, pouring her pain and resilience into stories. By the time she turned 21, her first book hit the shelves, a memoir about her journey from abandonment to belonging. It became a national bestseller. On launch day, Richard sat in the front row of her book signing, pride shining in his eyes. Danielle dedicated the book with words that made the audience choke back tears. "To the man who saw me when the world turned away, you didn't just save me, you taught me how to live." The applause was thunderous. But for Danielle, the real victory wasn't the fame or the sales. It was standing there, whole, unbroken, with the man who chose her by her side. As they left the bookstore that night, Richard placed an arm around her shoulders. "So, what's next?" he asked. Danielle smiled. "Life, and whatever we make of it." The night air was cool, the city lights bright. But for the first time, Danielle didn't feel small. She felt limitless. And in that quiet, undeniable truth, her story came full circle. Abandoned by the man who broke her, rescued by the man who saw her, transformed by the love that redefined family. Her past would always be part of her, but it no longer owned her. Danielle was free.